He prayed every night for his master to kill him and end his shame. Flicker, the little clay lamp, knew he was a failure. A thin, almost invisible crack ran down his side, a flaw from the very day he was fired in the kiln. It was a weeping wound that constantly leaked a slow, greasy tear of oil. While his brothers stood proud on the shelf, their flames burning with a steady, golden brilliance, his own was a pathetic, sputtering thing, weak and starved. His constant shame had an antagonist, a name and a voice, Beacon. Beacon was the master's prize creation, a large, ornate lantern of flawless porcelain, whose light was so bright it cast shadows that seemed to mock the darkness rather than comfort it. "Look at the puddle maker," Beacon's voice would boom across the quiet workshop. "The master must be a sentimental old fool to keep such a leaky disgrace." Every night, when the master made his rounds, Flicker would shrink back. The master's hand would hover over him, and Flicker would send a silent, desperate plea, "Please. Just a slip of the fingers. Let me fall. Let me shatter. End this." But the master never did. Instead, he would simply refill him, his touch gentle, his expression unreadable. Tonight was different. It was the eve of the Festival of Light, the one night the entire village would come to see the master's work. This was Flicker's ultimate nightmare. To fail was one thing, to fail in public was a torture beyond imagining. In a desperate act, he tried to roll himself to the back of the shelf, hoping to hide in the shadows where his weakness belonged. But the master's hand found him. He was lifted into the air. This is it, Flicker thought, a surge of relief washing over him. The kiln. The hammer. Anything. The choice, he realized, was no longer his. But then the master did something worse than destruction. He placed Flicker on the very front of the main display table, in the place of highest honor, directly beside the magnificent beacon. A wave of nausea, a dizzying sense of vertigo, swept through the little lamp. The master began to fill them. Beacon received his oil first, filled to the brim, his perfect vessel swallowing the liquid greedily. Then the master turned to Flicker. And in a gesture of what could only be described as deliberate cruelty, he poured only a few drops of oil into him, barely enough to sustain a flame for an hour. It was a death sentence, but not the one he had prayed for. It was a sentence to public humiliation. The master was not going to kill him, he was going to force him to die in front of everyone. The festival began. Villagers filled the workshop, their faces glowing in the warm light of 100 perfect lamps. And in the center of it all, Flicker sputtered. He tried to burn brightly, to defy the master's cruel rationing, but it was a fool's errand. Every surge of his flame only made the oil leak faster, forming a dark, shameful puddle on the polished wood beneath him. "His flame is weeping, just like his body," Beacon's voice resonated, low enough for only Flicker to hear. What a pathetic display. Children pointed. A woman whispered to her husband, her words sharp as glass shards. Why would the master display a broken one? Each glance was a physical blow. A sudden draft from the open door swept through the room, and Flicker's flame bent sideways, nearly winking out. He held on by a thread of wick and will, the darkness licking at his edges. His defeat was inevitable, a slow, agonizing countdown. He watched the oil level in his belly drop with terrifying speed. Soon, the last drop was gone. The wick, starved and dry, glowed a desperate orange for a moment, then sizzled. And died. Darkness consumed him. The space he occupied became a black hole in a galaxy of light, more conspicuous in its absence than it ever was in its pathetic presence. The whispers grew louder. Beacon's light seemed to swell with triumph, casting an even deeper shadow where Flicker stood. The shame was absolute, a crushing weight that he thought would crack him completely. The master approached the table, his face a stony mask. He did not look at Flicker. He simply took a cloth and, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of disappointment, wiped away the oily puddle. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Flicker cold, dark, and utterly abandoned in the heart of the celebration. When the last villager had departed, the master returned. Flicker braced himself for the final, merciful blow. The master picked him up, his touch surprisingly gentle, and carried him not to the trash heap or the kiln, but to a dark, quiet corner of the workshop. He lit a single, tall candle. And in its soft light, Flicker saw the wall. For months, for years, this corner had been his place. And the oil that had leaked from his weeping wound, the very essence of his shame, had not been wiped away. It had stained the plaster. Drop by drop, tear by tear, it had soaked into the wall and formed a picture. It was a breathtakingly beautiful, ghostly image of a weeping willow, its branches flowing downwards in shimmering, semi-translucent trails of darkness. It was a masterpiece born of his flaw. The master had not kept him out of pity. He had kept him as a tool. A paintbrush. A wave of profound, earth-shattering relief washed over Flicker. He was not a failure. He was a secret artist. His purpose was not to give light, but to create beauty from darkness. His joy was short-lived. The next evening, the master brought a visitor into the workshop, a wealthy merchant, a known patron of the arts. "This," the master announced, his voice filled with a strange gravity, "is my finest work." He brought Beacon over to illuminate the wall. Flicker, placed on a small stool before his creation, felt a surge of pride. But the merchant squinted, his lip curling in disdain. "This? It's an oil stain, man. A clever accident, perhaps, but it is unfinished. Crude." Beacon's light seemed to flicker with silent laughter. "Even your secret is a failure," his presence seemed to hum. The master's shoulders slumped. He looked at the wall, then at the merchant. "You are right," he said, his voice hollow. "It is incomplete." He walked to his workbench and picked up a heavy stonemason's hammer. Flicker's newfound hope shattered. The master, shamed before a patron, was going to destroy the painting. And him with it. He was going to erase his flaw, and the art it had created, from existence. As the master raised the hammer high, his shadow looming over both the wall and the little lamp, Flicker went cold with terror. But in that final, suspended moment, he saw it. The master was not looking at the wall. He was not looking at Flicker. His eyes were fixed, with an unnerving intensity, on Beacon. The epiphany struck Flicker with the force of a physical blow. The art was not the stain on the wall. The art was the story. This entire performance, the merchant's scorn, Beacon's arrogant light, his own despair, it was all part of the canvas. The master swung the hammer. But not at the wall. The sound was a deafening crack, a sharp, percussive explosion that silenced the entire world. It was the sound of perfection shattering. The hammer fell upon Beacon. The flawless porcelain lantern exploded into 1,000 white shards, its brilliant light extinguished in an instant. The merchant gasped. There was a profound silence, broken only by the gentle, steady flicker of the single candle. The master turned to the stunned merchant, his voice calm and clear in the sudden dimness. "The work was never the stain," he said softly. "The work was a choice. One vessel was perfect, and gave a brilliant but common light that is now gone forever. The other was flawed, and through its wound, it created a beauty that will last." He gestured to the painting on the wall, now looking deeper and more mysterious in the soft candlelight. "Now," the master said, "it is complete." The merchant stared, his mouth agape, not at the wall, but at the empty space where Beacon had stood. He understood. He had not been invited to see a painting. He had been invited to witness a philosophy. The master swept the shards of Beacon into a dustpan without a second glance. The merchant, humbled and silent, paid the master triple his asking price, not for a stained wall, but for the lesson. Later that night, the master placed Flicker not on the crowded shelf with the others, but alone, on the mantelpiece, a solitary exhibit. His gentle flame cast a soft glow on the wall, his life's work. He no longer prayed for the end. He prayed for the night, for his work was not yet finished. If we look deeply into our own lives, we find we are all made of clay. Some of us might feel like Beacon, polished and perfect on the outside, terrified that a single crack might reveal that our brilliance is nothing special. And some of us feel like Flicker, defined by a flaw we think is a source of shame, a crack that makes us feel worthless and broken. The truth is, we spend so much of our lives trying to hide our cracks. We polish them, we cover them up, we pray that no one will see them. But what if the master who made you knew about the crack all along? What if he did not see it as a mistake, but as an opening? The very place through which your most unique, most beautiful, most lasting work could pour out into the world. So, I want to hear from you. Comment below and tell me, have you ever felt like Flicker, ashamed of a flaw that you later realized was a source of strength? Or have you ever been a Beacon, judging another's imperfection without understanding the beauty it could create? Your story matters, because it might be the light someone else needs to see their own cracks differently. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that their imperfections do not disqualify them, they qualify them for a unique purpose. Do not forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us of the hidden beauty in our world, and in ourselves. Until next time, be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. And remember that sometimes, the cracks are where the art gets in. Stay true, and keep shining, in your own perfectly imperfect way. Chapter 1. He kept hitting snooze while his mother was dying, unable to pay for her medicine. The first alarm, at 5:00 a.m., was an optimistic shriek he silenced with a lazy slap. The second, at 5:09, was a pathetic negotiation with reality, dismissed with a groan. The third, at 5:18, was the sound of failure itself. Each press of the button was a tiny, sweet betrayal, a 9-minute dose of oblivion that cost more than he could imagine. His antagonist was not a person, it was the warm, heavy comfort of his duvet, a plush tomb he willingly entered every morning. A text message glowed on his nightstand, a crack of harsh light in his self-imposed darkness. It was from Dr. Evans. Alex, the hospital needs the deposit for the neurolecin treatment by Friday. We CA not proceed otherwise. Friday. That was tomorrow. $15,000. The number felt like a physical weight on his chest, suffocating him. The solution was right there, waiting in his inbox. An email with the subject line, Urgent, Project Fujiwara Kickoff. A Japanese tech firm wanted a complete brand overhaul, a massive, career-making project. The lead designer, Mr. Fujiwara himself, was a legend. He was also in Tokyo. The kickoff call, the one that would seal the deal and release the 50% advance payment, was scheduled for 5:30 a.m. His time. It was the only way. Alex sat up, the room spinning. He could do this. He had to. He stumbled to the kitchen, made a cup of instant coffee that tasted like dirt and desperation, and sat at his desk. He opened the files, his mind a fog of anxiety. He just needed to stay awake for another, 20 minutes? But the voice started whispering, the one that sounded like him but was not. You re-exhausted. You see not impress a genius like Fujiwara in this state. Just lie down for 10 minutes. Just 10. Close your eyes and reboot. It was such a reasonable, caring voice. He listened. He set a new alarm for 5:28 a.m. And lay on top of his covers, just for a moment. The next thing he knew, sunlight was streaming through his window. It was 8:43 a.m. Panic, cold and sharp, stabbed him. He snatched his phone. Missed calls. And an email. It was not the angry rejection he expected. It read, Mr. Alex, a scheduling conflict has arisen on our end. Mr. Fujiwara was very impressed with your portfolio and would like to extend you a final opportunity. The call has been rescheduled for tomorrow, same time. 5:30 a.m. We look forward to speaking with you. It was not a reprieve. It was a curse. He had not just been given a second chance, he'd been given a second chance to fail, with the stakes now impossibly, unbearably higher. Chapter 2. This time, he would not fail. That night, sleep was a battlefield. Alex set 3 alarms, placing his phone in the bathroom to force himself out of bed. He drank a liter of water before sleeping, hoping a full bladder would be a more effective motivator than his mother's mortality. He lay in bed, eyes wide open, watching the numbers on the ceiling clock burn through the minutes. Every creak of the building was the sound of his future collapsing. When the first alarm finally blared at 5 a.m. It sounded like a fire truck inside his skull. He launched himself out of bed, a clumsy, desperate scramble, and stumbled into the bathroom, knocking over a bottle of shampoo. He silenced the alarm, his heart hammering. He stared at his reflection in the mirror. His eyes were bloodshot, his face pale. The voice was back, but now it was a venomous whisper. Look at you. You think you can win a $30,000 contract looking like that? You did not sleep. Your brain is not working. You, stammer, you, make a fool of yourself, and you, lose everything. Go back to sleep. Wake up at 7, send an apology. Live to fight another day. He was shaking. The logic was so cruel, so seductive. He was too tired to fight it. Maybe the voice was right. Defeated, he walked back to his bedroom, the cold floorboards feeling like a path to the gallows. He crawled under the covers, the warmth instantly wrapping around him like a snake. Just one more day, he whispered to the empty room. I'll figure it out. He slept. He slept through 5:30. He slept through the sunrise. He was woken at 9:15 by his phone ringing. It was not Dr. Evans. It was his mother. Her voice was a fragile, paper-thin thing. Alex, honey. She began, her words broken by a shallow cough. The doctor, he was just here. He said the window is closing. He used that word. Closing. There was no accusation in her voice, no anger. Just a deep, bottomless well of fear. And it was that placid terror, that gentle acceptance of the fate he was choosing for her, that finally broke him. He hung up the phone and stared at the wall, a single, hot tear tracing a path through the stubble on his cheek. He had not just hit snooze on an alarm, he hit snooze on his mother's life. Chapter 3 Desperation is a powerful anesthetic. It numbs you to shame. Alex tore his apartment apart, grabbing anything of value. His prized laptop, his monitor, his grandfather's watch. He took them to a pawn shop and walked out with $1,100, a pathetic fraction of what he needed. Holding the crumpled bills, he went to the hospital, a meaningless offering to a god he ignored for too long. His mother was sleeping, her breath a faint, rhythmic rattle. On her nightstand, next to a plastic cup of water, was her old sketchbook. He picked it up. He remembered her drawing constantly when he was a kid. He had not seen her touch it in 20 years. He flipped through the first few pages, filled with beautiful, intricate pencil drawings of flowers and landscapes. Then, the pages became empty. All of them, blank. Except for one, near the end. It was a hurried, unfinished sketch of him as a boy, kicking a soccer ball. Below it was a list, written in her familiar cursive. September 10, 1998, will start painting again when Alex starts school. June 5, 2006, will get back to my art once Alex finishes his high school exams. August 20, 2010, just need to see Alex settled in his first job, then it's my time. May 1, 2023, maybe after I feel better. The truth hit him like a physical blow. She had not given up on her dream. She had just kept hitting snooze. For 30 years. His weakness was not his own, it was a legacy, a poison passed down through love and sacrifice. He was not just lazy, he was living out her curse. A white-hot rage, pure and clean, burned through his despair. He would not let this be how their story ended. He stormed out of the room, pulled out his phone, and found the number for the Fujiwara Corporation. He would call. He would beg. He would offer to work for free, anything to get back in. The assistant answered, her voice polite and cool. Fujiwara Tech, how can I help you? Alex explained who he was, his voice cracking with urgency. There was a pause. Oh, yes, Mr. Alex, she said. Thank you for the recommendation. We have already awarded the project to Mr. Renshaw. His preliminary ideas are excellent. Alex froze. Mark Renshaw. His bitterest professional rival. Recommendation. I did not recommend anyone. The assistant sounded confused. But you did, sir. You sent an email this morning, just after 8 a.m. You explained you were withdrawing for personal health reasons and stated that Mark Renshaw was the only other designer in the city with the vision for the project. His blood turned to ice. He fumbled to open his email, his hands shaking. There it was. In his sent folder. An email he had no memory of writing, a perfectly crafted, professional surrender. The voice in his head, the one that urged him to sleep, had not just been making him fail. It had been actively working for the other side. It had taken his dream, his mother's only hope, and handed it directly to his enemy. He was at the bottom. He had not just been losing a battle, he had been a traitor in his own war. Chapter 4 There, in the sterile quiet of the hospital corridor, under the flickering fluorescent lights, Alex finally saw his enemy clearly. It was not the clock. It was not Mark Renshaw. It was the other Alex. The one who lived in the warm sheets. The one who spoke with the voice of reason and comfort. The one who wrote emails while he slept. The choice was never about waking up to win a job. It was about waking up to kill that other man before he erased Alex completely. He looked at his phone. The alarm for the next day was still set for 5 a.m. A bitter laugh escaped his lips. The Fujiwara project was gone. That battle was lost. But the war had just begun. He did not go home. He went to a 24-hour coffee shop, the $1,100 from the pawn shop still in his pocket. He bought the strongest coffee they had and sat down. He did not plan to win back the old job. He planned to win everything else. He spent the next 6 hours researching, his fingers flying across the keyboard of the cheap library computer. He found online design sprints, brutal, 24-hour global competitions hosted by major corporations, with huge cash prizes and immediate payouts. The next one started at midnight, Pacific Time. 5 a.m. His time. When the alarm on his phone went off, he was already awake. He did not silence it. He let it scream, a declaration of war. It was no longer a summons to a job he might lose. It was the starting gun for his own salvation. For the next 24 hours, he did not move. He was fueled by rage, grief, and a terrifying clarity. He designed with a ferocity he never knew he possessed, pouring every ounce of his shame and fear into the pixels on the screen. He ignored the emails, the notifications, the exhaustion. He was a machine built for one purpose. He submitted his final project with 3 minutes to spare and passed out on the sticky coffee shop table. He woke up to an email. Congratulations. You have won the OmniCorp Global Design Sprint. The prize was $20,000. It was more than enough. 2 months later, Alex stood by his mother's hospital window, watching the sunrise. The neurolecin was working. Color had returned to her cheeks. In her hands, she held her sketchbook, and for the first time in decades, she was drawing. Her phone chimed softly, a reminder for her morning medication. Without hesitation, she reached over, silenced it, and took the pills. She had stopped hitting snooze. Alex looked from her to the dawn breaking over the city. On the nightstand, his own phone lay face down. The snooze button was still there, a tiny, harmless icon on a screen of glass. But it was no longer a temptation. It was a tombstone. And what about you? Is that alarm you set tonight a tool to build your future? Or is it just a tombstone for the person you could have been, waiting for you to press it one more time? His brilliant idea was worth millions. He let it rot in the drafts folder on his desktop. The folder was a digital tombstone, and every time Alex's mouse hovered over it, he felt the cold chill of his own potential. The idea was called Mind Garden, a revolutionary app that visualized a user's mental habits as a garden. Meditate, and a stream would flow. Procrastinate, and weeds would grow. It was beautiful, intuitive, and, according to his best friend Mark, a guaranteed unicorn. But for 2 years, the seeds of that garden remained locked in a document, unplanted. This morning, a notification flashed on his screen, an invitation to the Innovate West Tech Conference. A keynote speaker had dropped out, opening up a few last-minute slots for a lightning round of new pitches. The deadline was tomorrow. Mark's text came a second later. This is it, man. No more excuses. Submit the pitch deck. I'll even help you with the slides. Alex's stomach twisted. This was the antagonist he faced every day, not a person, but a moment. the moment where thought had to become action. He opened the Mind Garden folder, the files staring back at him like neglected children. He could almost feel the weight of the code he had not written, the business plan he had not finalized. He spent the next hour not building the pitch deck, but refining a single, insignificant line of code from a year-old prototype. It was a familiar ritual of fake productivity, a way to touch his dream without taking the risk of actually pursuing it. The choice was not just about the conference. It was about exposing his fragile, perfect idea to the harsh light of reality. What if they laughed? What if they said it was stupid? In the drafts folder, it was still perfect. It was still worth millions. To act was to risk discovering it was worthless. As the sun began to set, he leaned back, exhausted by his own inaction, ready to text Mark another excuse. Then his phone buzzed with a new email. The subject line read, "Congratulations. Your Innovate West Lightning Round submission." Alex's blood ran cold. He opened it to find a confirmation for Alex Carter, creator of Mind Garden. A final text from Mark sealed his fate. "I submitted the old summary you sent me last year. You re-in. All you have to do is show up. Do not make me look like an idiot." To panic was a tidal wave. Being forced into the arena was infinitely worse than choosing to enter it. Alex spent a sleepless night throwing together a haphazard presentation, fueled by resentment and cheap energy drinks. He arrived at the conference late, his shirt wrinkled, his mind a fog of self-pity. The air crackled with ambition, a currency he had hoarded but never spent. Backstage, he watched other presenters, sharp and confident, their pitches flowing like poetry. He felt like an imposter. When they called his name, a wave of nausea hit him. On stage, under the blinding lights, his carefully constructed facade crumbled. His laptop refused to connect to the projector for a full, agonizing minute. When the first slide finally appeared, a blurry, pixelated logo he de-designed in a fit of late-night inspiration, he heard a few people in the audience chuckle. He started to speak, but his voice was a weak, stammering thing. He raced through the concept of Mind Garden, the words tumbling out in a disorganized mess. He saw the investors in the front row, their faces impassive. One was scrolling through his phone. Another was whispering to his neighbor. When he finished, there was a polite, lukewarm applause. A woman in the front row raised her hand. "What's your user acquisition and monetization strategy?" It was a basic question. He had a dozen answers written down in his business plan, sitting in the drafts folder. But on stage, his mind was a blank slate. He mumbled something about freemium models and organic growth, his voice trailing off. He knew he sounded like a fool. He walked off the stage before anyone could ask another question, his face burning with a shame so intense it felt physical. As he fled towards the exit, he overheard two men in suits talking by the water cooler. "That Mind Garden concept had legs," one said. "Shame the kid presenting was a complete train wreck. Someone else should build that properly." 3. The humiliation of the conference sent Alex into a spiral. He ignored Mark's calls. He spent weeks in a haze of video games and takeout, the drafts folder on his desktop now feeling radioactive. He had not only failed, he had advertised his brilliant idea to a room full of people far more capable of building it than he was. He was a ghost haunting his own life, watching the world move on without him. One rainy Tuesday, Mark showed up at his door, refusing to be ignored any longer. He did not say, "I told you so." He just held out his phone. "You need to see this," he said, his voice flat. It was an article from a major tech journal. The headline read, "Wellness app Flourish secures $5 million in seed funding, aims to revolutionize mental health." Alex stared at the screenshots. A beautiful, animated garden grew on the screen. Users were rewarded for positive habits with flowing streams and blooming flowers. It was Mind Garden. Polished, funded, and real. It was his soul, stolen and sold. A surge of white-hot rage burned through his apathy. "They stole it," he whispered, the words trembling. That investor from the conference, he must have taken the idea. For a fleeting moment, he felt a strange sense of relief. He was not a failure. He was a victim. He could fight this. "No, Alex," Mark said, his face etched with guilt. "They did not steal it from the conference." He took a deep breath. "A year ago, before the conference. I was so frustrated you were sitting on this. I showed the original business plan to a former colleague, a guy I trusted, just to get some feedback. He worked at a big firm then." Alex stared at him, uncomprehending. "The feedback?" Mark continued, unable to meet his eyes. It was not mixed. He was blown away. "He told me it was the best idea he'd ever seen." He quit his job 3 months later to found Flourish. The truth landed like a physical blow. The world had not robbed him. He had not been betrayed by a stranger. His own inaction had loaded the gun, and his best friend, in a desperate attempt to help, had pulled the trigger. He was not a victim. He was a volunteer. He had delivered his dream, gift-wrapped, into the hands of his successor. For rock bottom was not a place of fire and fury, it was a quiet, empty room where the only sound was the hum of a computer. Alex sat in front of his monitor, his face illuminated by the screen. He was going to delete it all. The code, the business plan, the mock-ups. He would wipe the slate clean, erase the monument to his failure. He right-clicked on the drafts folder, his finger hovering over the delete button. And then, he saw it. A small piece of metadata in the corner of the properties window, date created, October 23, 2019. 4 years. Not 2. He had been letting this dream die for 4 years. The number struck him with more force than any betrayal. An entire chapter of his life, sacrificed at the altar of tomorrow. The enemy was not the CEO of Flourish. It was not even Mark. It was the warm, seductive comfort of the drafts folder, the place where potential never had to face the possibility of failure. It was a prison he had built for himself, and he had been its most willing inmate. He did not delete the folder. Instead, with a strange, newfound calm, he moved his cursor and created a new document on the desktop. It was blank. He typed a single sentence, a simple browser extension that locks you out of social media after 10 minutes. It was a tiny idea. A stupid idea, maybe. It was not worth millions. It probably was not worth $10. He titled the document Day 1. Then he began to code. He worked for an hour, then 2. The code was messy, inefficient, and ugly. But it worked. At 3 a.m., he uploaded the raw, buggy, deeply imperfect file to a public forum for developers. He wrote a short post, "It's not pretty, and it probably has a dozen bugs, but it's here. My first step." He clicked Submit. He stared at his desktop. The old Mind Garden folder sat there, a ghost of a past life. Next to it was a new folder named Projects, containing one single, tiny file. The millions were gone. The dream was dead. But for the first time in a very long time, nothing was rotting. Chapter 1. The doctor gave him a simple plan to save his life. He decided to start on Monday. The words were not spoken with defiance, but with the calm, organized certainty of a man who managed complex software projects for a living. David's entire world was built on timelines, launch dates, and fresh starts. What was a health directive but another project? Project, life extension. Start date, next Monday. He shook the doctor's hand, took the neatly printed sheet of paper, and walked out into the afternoon sun, feeling not fear, but a strange sense of administrative relief. The problem had been identified, a solution proposed. The rest was just implementation. Have you ever heard that voice in your head? The one that sounds so reasonable, so logical. It does not scream, no. It whispers later. David's inner voice was not a lazy slob, it was a cunning project manager. It told him that starting now, on a Thursday, was inefficient. The weekend was coming up, with a planned barbecue. It would be foolish to start a new diet just before a feast. A proper start required a clean slate. A Monday. His wife, Sarah, saw the paper on the kitchen counter. Walk 30 minutes a day. No more soda. Her eyes were wide with a hope that pained him. That's it. That's all you have to do. He nodded, already opening his laptop. That's it. I'll start on Monday. Get everything in order first. She paused, her hope dimming slightly. Why not, tonight? We could take a walk together. Right now. There it was. The choice. Not the grand, life or death decision in a sterile office, but a small, quiet one on a Thursday evening. It was a choice between the immediate, uncomfortable effort and the comforting, abstract promise of later. The project manager in his head spoke up. An impromptu start is a failed start. We need the right gear. Proper shoes. A plan. He looked at his wife and smiled a reassuring lie. Let's do it right. I'll buy new running shoes this weekend. We'll start fresh on Monday. I promise. The weekend was a masterpiece of proactive procrastination. He spent 4 hours at the sports store, comparing gel cushioning and arch support. He bought the most expensive, brightly colored shoes he could find. They sat in their box by the front door, a monument to his good intentions. On Sunday night, as he drank his last ever soda, a final, ceremonial farewell, he felt a surge of pride. The plan was perfect. He was ready. But as he went to bed, his phone buzzed. It was a calendar alert from his boss. Emergency meeting, Project Phoenix. 7 a.m. Monday. He stared at the screen, a cold knot tightening in his stomach. The perfect Monday was already broken. Chapter 2. We all know what happens to a broken Monday. It becomes an excuse for a broken week. The 7 a.m. meeting bled into a frantic day of debugging. There was no time for a walk. It's not my fault, the voice reasoned. The universe conspired against me. He'd start on Tuesday. But Tuesday morning, he woke up sore from the stress of Monday. Wednesday, it rained. Each day, the perfect, expensive shoes by the door seemed to mock him. They were no longer a symbol of a new beginning, but a neon orange tombstone for a life he had not started living yet. The failure was not loud. It was a quiet, creeping decay. He started taking the stairs at work, telling himself it counted. He'd switched to diet soda for a day, a tiny negotiation with his own mortality. But the walks never happened. The cycle of self-deceit spun faster, a dizzying spiral into inertia. He began to resent Sarah's hopeful glances at the shoes, her gentle questions about how he was feeling. Each inquiry felt like an accusation. His home, once a sanctuary, was becoming a courtroom where he was both the defendant and the prosecutor. The breaking point came at his son's 8th birthday party. The kids were playing soccer in the backyard. His son, Leo, kicked the ball toward him. "Come on, Dad, play with us." David jogged a few steps, his chest immediately on fire, his lungs screaming for air. He took one clumsy kick and stumbled, gasping, leaning against a tree while the world swam in black spots. The look on Leo's face was not just disappointment. It was a flicker of fear. The fear of a child seeing his hero crumble. In that moment, David felt a wave of self-loathing so powerful it almost brought him to his knees. That night, he saw a calendar reminder on his phone for his 3-month follow-up with the doctor. With a trembling finger, he called the office first thing in the morning and canceled it, his voice sounding hollow and distant as he lied, "Everything's fine, I'm feeling much better. I'll reschedule soon." He had officially chosen the comfort of the lie over the possibility of the truth. Chapter 3: The wake-up call you ignore does not just go away. It finds a louder way to get your attention. A month later, at the office, the sound was not an alarm clock, but a collective gasp followed by a sickening thud. Paramedics were rushing past his cubicle, their faces grim. They were surrounding the desk of Mark, the guy from accounting. Mark was the same age as David, had the same tired look, and often joked about his coffee and donut diet. They wheeled him out on a stretcher, his face a ghastly shade of gray. A massive heart attack. He was dead before he reached the hospital. The shock was electric. It bypassed every rationalization David had ever built. This was not a doctor's warning, this was a ghost story, and he was looking at his own future. That evening, he did not wait. He tore open the shoebox, laced up the bright orange shoes, and burst out the door. He did not walk, he ran. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs were jelly, a frantic, desperate sprint away from the ghost in the office. He collapsed on his lawn an hour later, drenched in sweat, but feeling a euphoric sense of victory. He had done it. He had finally broken the curse. But the voice in our heads, the one born of years of habit, is a patient predator. The next day, every muscle in David's body screamed in protest. He was a hero, a changed man. And what do heroes deserve? A reward. As he limped to the kitchen, the voice returned, no longer a project manager, but a soothing friend. "You were amazing yesterday. You shocked the system. Now you need to recover. Do not push too hard and get injured. Take a rest day. You've earned it." It was the most dangerous lie of all, because it was wrapped in the language of self-care. He had found the ultimate loophole, using his one moment of success as the perfect justification to return to his old ways. The victory was not the beginning of a new life, it was the final, perfect excuse he needed to stop trying altogether. He was back at square one, only now he was convinced he had already won the race. Chapter 4: He hit bottom in the parking lot of a fast food restaurant on a rainy Tuesday, 2 weeks later. He was hiding. Hiding from his wife, his son, and the ghost of Mark. He had just finished a double cheeseburger and was crumpling the greasy wrapper into a ball to hide at the bottom of the trash can at home. This was his life now, a series of small, pathetic deceptions. He leaned his head against the steering wheel, the smell of stale fries filling his car. This was it. This was the pathetic end. Then, something caught his eye. The receipt on the passenger seat. He picked it up, his gaze falling on the date. It was October 24th. A Monday. In that greasy, quiet car, the truth hit him. It was not a lightning bolt of inspiration, it was a cold, slow flood of shame. He had been waiting for Monday. A magic day. A clean slate. But every week had a Monday. He had been given 52 of them a year, and he had squandered every single one, waiting for a perfect one that would never arrive. The lie was not, "I'll start Monday." The lie was Monday. The belief that a day on the calendar held more power than the decision he could make in any given second. Monday was the disease, not the cure. He did not make a grand pronouncement. He did not call his wife. The voice in his head started to whisper, "Okay, this is it. The real rock bottom. Tomorrow, we start for real." "No," David said out loud, his voice raspy in the silent car. He opened the door, got out, and dropped the greasy wrapper into a public trash can. He left his car in the lot. And he started to walk. It was not a power walk. It was not a run. It was just one foot in front of the other, through the drizzle, on the 2-mile journey home. It was uncomfortable. It was slow. It was real. When he finally walked up his driveway an hour later, soaked and tired, Sarah opened the door. She saw his wet clothes, his exhausted face, and the empty space in the driveway where his car should have been. She looked at him, and for the first time in months, she did not ask a single question. She just opened the door wider and let him in. He had not been saved by a plan or a promise. He was saved in the moment he realized the only thing more dangerous than a doctor's warning was the comfort of a calendar. Chapter 1. He could buy any company in the world, but his own daughter blocked his number on her 10th birthday. The notification glared from the screen of his phone, a sterile, digital tombstone on a decade of fatherhood. Julian Thorne sat back in the cream leather seat of his Gulfstream G650, the muted roar of the engines a familiar lullaby that suddenly felt like an accusation. Below him, the patchwork of the American Midwest was an irrelevant map. The only geography that mattered was the unbridgeable distance between his private jet and his daughter's heart. His first instinct, the one honed in 1,000 boardrooms, was tactical. This was a negotiation. A childish, emotional gambit, but a gambit nonetheless. Lily wanted something. He just had to figure out her price. He messaged his personal concierge. Find the rarest pony in the United States. White, with blue eyes if possible. Have it delivered to Sarah's address by 5 p.m. No excuses. A wave of satisfaction washed over him. Problems were simply transactions waiting to happen. But then his phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Sarah, his ex-wife. Her voice was stripped of its usual weary tolerance. "Did you really think that would work, Julian?" He stiffened. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "The pony. The literal pony you just tried to have delivered to a suburban house with a yard the size of a postage stamp." She saw the truck. She locked herself in her room. The tactical advantage evaporated, replaced by a hot wire of irritation. It's her birthday. I got her a gift. She did not block you because she wants a gift, Sarah's voice cracked with a decade of frustration. She blocked you because you missed her school play yesterday. You were the only parent who was not there. She waited for you. The words hit him like a physical blow. The play. It had been a post-it note on his assistant's monitor, swallowed by a multi-billion-dollar acquisition deal. He was faced with a choice. He could order the pilot to turn the plane around, abandon the deal that would make headlines, and fly home to beg for a forgiveness he was not sure he deserved. Or he could close the deal, secure his legacy, and buy a gift so extravagant, so impossibly grand, that it would eclipse any missed play. He looked at the deal prospectus on the tablet beside him, its cold numbers promising power and control. He chose control. "I'll make it up to her," he said, his voice flat. "Julian, do not," he ended the call. He had made his choice. Chapter 2 Julian's attempt to make it up to her was a masterclass in emotional deafness. It began with him buying out New York's most iconic toy store for a 2-hour private shopping spree for Lily. He sent a black car to pick her up. She refused to get in. The press, catching wind of the spectacle, ran stories with headlines like "Billionaire Dad's Lonely Party." Humiliation tasted like ash. Next, he made a 7-figure donation to her school to have the new science wing named the Lily Thorne Center for Innovation. He thought the grand gesture would impress her, a permanent monument to his affection. Instead, Sarah called him, her voice trembling with rage. Now she's the rich girl whose dad buys buildings instead of showing up. She was bullied for the first time today, Julian. Congratulations. Each attempt was a step down a spiral staircase into a deeper, more isolated darkness. He was a man who reshaped markets with a single phone call, yet he could not manage a simple conversation with his own child. The pressure mounted, a physical weight in his chest. He started snapping at his staff, his focus shattered. The crowning failure came during a live television interview about his recent acquisition. The host, with a predatory smile, went off script. "Mr. Thorne, you can acquire any company, but sources say you cannot get a call back from your own daughter. Any comment?" Julian froze. The camera's red light was a merciless eye, broadcasting his failure to millions. He mumbled something about privacy and family matters, but the damage was done. That night, sitting alone in his penthouse overlooking a city he felt he owned, he felt a profound, crushing defeat. He scrolled through his phone, stopping on the last photo he had of Lily, a forced smile at a sterile charity gala months ago. He tried calling her again, a desperate, foolish hope. The call did not even go to voicemail. It was just dead air. A new notification popped up on his screen, this one from a news alert. It was a photo of Sarah, Lily, and another man, smiling, holding a small, homemade-looking birthday cake. The man had his arm around Lily, and she was leaning into him, laughing. Julian did not recognize him. He felt the floor drop out from beneath him, leaving him in a freefall of absolute despair. Chapter 3 In a desperate search for a clue, for some forgotten key to his daughter's heart, Julian found himself in a climate-controlled storage unit where the artifacts of his former life were archived. He stumbled upon an old hard drive labeled "Family." Hooking it up to his laptop, he clicked through years of professionally shot, sterile photos until he found a folder of raw video files. One was titled Lily's 5th birthday. The video was shaky, filmed by Sarah. A younger Julian was on the floor of a much smaller apartment, surrounded by a mountain of expensive, brightly colored plastic toys. But little Lily was ignoring them all. In her hands was a simple, generic box of building blocks. "Build the wobbly castle, Daddy," she squealed. In the video, Julian laughed, a genuine, unburdened sound he barely recognized, and together they built a clumsy, asymmetrical tower that collapsed every few minutes, sending them into fits of giggles. that was it. The memory hit him with the force of a physical impact. It was not about price or rarity. It was about a wobbly castle. A flicker of hope ignited in the wreckage of his despair. He knew what to do. He left the storage unit and drove himself, a foreign experience, to the nearest big box toy store. He found the exact set of simple, wooden blocks and bought them, the cheap cardboard box feeling more valuable than anything in his portfolio. This was not a transaction, it was an apology. He drove to Sarah's house, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and terror. As he walked up the driveway, he saw them through the large living room window. Lily was at the table. And next to her, laughing and showing her how to glue two pieces of wood together, was the man from the photograph. They were not building a wobbly castle. They were building a small, simple birdhouse. And Lily was looking at the men with the same adoration she had once reserved for him. The box of blocks in Julian's hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy, a pathetic symbol of a memory that was no longer his. He had not just been replaced. He had been rendered obsolete. He was standing on the outside, looking in at a life that had rebuilt itself without him. This was his lowest point, a bottom so deep and dark he was not sure there was a way up. Chapter 4. Standing in the cold, Julian watched them for another minute. He saw the easy warmth, the shared smile, the simple presence he had traded for stock prices and market share. The truth landed on him, not as a thought, but as a certainty. He could not win her back by competing. He could not buy what that man was giving her for free. The wobbly castle was not the solution, it was a diagnosis of the disease. He had to stop trying to acquire love and start learning how to earn it. His choice in the jet, to pursue the deal, had been the final, fatal symptom. He walked back to his car, the box of blocks still in his hand. He took out his phone and made a call, not to his broker or his lawyer, but to the CEO of the company he was acquiring. He canceled the deal. He cited personal reasons, knowing the market would punish him for it, that his reputation would take a monumental hit. He did not care. For the first time, he was making a trade where the profit was not measured in dollars. Then, he opened his laptop and began to type. It was not an email or a press release. It was a story. A short, simple story about a foolish king who owned so many castles he forgot how to build one with his daughter. He did not mention names or specifics. He just wrote about his regret. He emailed it to Sarah with the subject line, "For Lily. If she wants it." He did not ask for a reply. He did not ask for forgiveness. The next morning, every financial news outlet was screaming about his cancelled deal. His net worth had plummeted by 10% overnight. His board was in chaos. He sat in his silent office, ignoring the storm of calls, feeling a strange sense of peace. Around noon, his phone buzzed. It was a new message from a number that was no longer blocked. It was not words. It was a picture. A single, red, wooden block, placed on a white background. It was not a castle, and it was not a birdhouse. But it was a start. It was the first block of something new. He could lose any company in the world, he realized, but he had just started the one acquisition that could never be liquidated. Chapter 1. His wife finally left him. Not for another man, but because she could not watch him shrink anymore. The sentence was written in Sarah's elegant script on a thick card, placed precisely in the center of the kitchen island. Next to it, her wedding ring caught the afternoon light, a perfect, lonely circle of gold. Mark read the note again. Shrink. The word felt alien, clinical. He was an accountant. Things on his spreadsheets shrank: budgets, profit margins, tax liabilities. People did not shrink. He walked through their silent two-bedroom colonial, the air thick with her absence. Her favorite mug was gone from the dish rack. The scent of her lemon verbena soap was already fading from the bathroom. The primary antagonist was not a rival, it was this accusation, this quiet judgment that he had somehow lessened. He did what he always did when faced with a problem: he tried to quantify it. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over her name. What would he even say? "Sarah, can you please define the metrics for this alleged shrinking?" Instead, he called his own voicemail, a habit from years of checking messages, a small ritual of control. The machine was empty. He felt a rising panic, a formless dread he could not file into a neat column. He had to fix this. He called her. She answered on the fourth ring. "Mark," she said, her voice weary. "I got your note," he said, his own voice sounding distant. "I do not understand." "If this is about the vacation we cancelled, I already explained the quarterly reports were." "Stop," she said softly. "Just stop, Mark. It was never about the vacation. It was about the fact that you were relieved we had to cancel it." The line went dead. The click of her hanging up felt more final than a slammed door. His attempt to solve the problem had only validated her reason for leaving. He stood in the sterile silence, faced with a choice. He could retreat into the familiar comfort of his work, burying himself in numbers until the feeling went away. Or he could face the terrifying, undefined void of her accusation. As he stood frozen, his phone buzzed. A text from his boss, David. "Emergency board meeting. 9 a.m. tomorrow. The Henderson acquisition is live. We need the boldest play in our playbook. This is the big one." The abstract choice was now a concrete deadline. The world was demanding he go big, just as his wife had condemned him for going small. Chapter 2. He chose the path he knew. At the 9 a.m. meeting, Mark presented a strategy that was a fortress of caution. It was financially sound, legally airtight, and creatively dead. He built walls against every conceivable risk, and in doing so, bricked up any possibility of spectacular success. When he finished, the CEO looked at him with a flat, unreadable expression. Then he turned to a young analyst named Chloe. "Anything to add?" Chloe, barely 30, stood up and outlined a plan that was aggressive, leveraged, and brilliant. It made Mark's proposal look like a child's drawing next to a blueprint. Mark did not just sit there, he felt an ugly, defensive instinct rise. "That's fiscally reckless," he interjected. "The exposure on that third quarter projection is unacceptable." He was actively fighting against growth, using the language of safety as a weapon. The CEO held up a hand. "Thank you, Mark. Your prudence is noted." It was a dismissal. Mark was sidelined. The spiral accelerated. He started leaving the office precisely at 5, no longer driven by ambition but by a need for the hollow comfort of his empty house. Friends would text, "Beer tonight," and he'd reply, "Swamped." Rain check. The rain checks piled up until the text stopped coming. He was a ghost in his own life. The ultimate failure was not emotional, it was mathematical, the only language he truly respected. A certified letter arrived from the bank. Due to a series of market downturns and his own company's stock dip following the now successful, and risky, Henderson acquisition, his adjustable rate mortgage was being re-evaluated. His salary, the bedrock of his safe little world, was no longer enough. The fortress he had built was starving him to death. Chapter 3. In a desperate search for old tax documents to plead his case with the bank, Mark went into the one place he had not touched in 15 years, the attic. Under a canvas sheet lay a heavy cedar chest, a wedding gift from Sarah's grandfather. He lifted the lid. The sharp, clean scent of cedar filled the air. Inside was not old paperwork. It was a life he did not recognize. There lay the half-finished hull of a wooden ship, a breathtakingly intricate model of the frigate USS Constitution. Below it were journals filled with sketches, diagrams, and a meticulously detailed business plan for a company called the Compass Rose, dedicated to creating museum-quality historical ship models. He flipped through the pages, his own confident handwriting mocking him from the past. He saw profit and loss projections that were daring, marketing plans that were ambitious. This was the man Sarah had married. The truth hit him like a physical blow. She did not leave the man he was, she left because he had murdered the man he was supposed to be. A manic energy seized him. He would finish it. He would finish the ship and send it to her. It would explain everything without a single word. He carefully carried the model downstairs to his cleared-out workbench. This was his path to redemption. He picked up a tiny, specialized chisel to continue the work on the stern carvings. But his hands, softened by 2 decades of tapping keyboards, felt alien and clumsy. The tool felt wrong. He tried to apply the delicate pressure he remembered, but his grip was unsure. With a sickening little crack, a sliver of carved oak, no bigger than a fingernail, broke off and fell to the floor. He stared at the new, ugly white scar on the dark wood. He had not only abandoned his dream, he had lost the very skill required to resurrect it. He was a stranger in his own past, too weak to even hold the tools of his former self. That was the bottom. Not failure, but utter, irreversible incompetence. Chapter 4. He slumped onto the workshop stool, the broken model a monument to his own decay. For an hour, he just stared. But as his eyes traced the lines of the ship, they settled on something he had not broken. A small section of the planking near the bow. He saw the joints, nearly invisible, where dozens of tiny wooden pieces met in a perfect, seamless curve. He remembered the feeling, not of ambition, not of business plans, but of quiet, focused joy as he had shaped each one. The epiphany was quiet, not a thunderclap. The point was never the finished ship. The point was the process. The shrinking had not been his failure to launch a company. The shrinking was every single day he had chosen the comfort of a spreadsheet over the challenge of shaping a piece of wood. With a strange sense of calm, he picked up the broken piece from the floor. He did not try to glue it back on the Constitution. That ship belonged to a different man. Instead, he took a fresh block of basswood from a drawer, found a simple schematic online for a small fishing dory, and made the first cut. He worked through the night, the small, rhythmic scrape of sandpaper filling the silence of the house. A month later, his tiny Etsy shop, named The Doryman, sold its first model for $60. A year later, he was barely breaking even, but his hands were calloused and steady. He never called Sarah. He did not need to prove anything anymore. One Saturday, while sanding the smooth, curved hull of a new boat, he looked at his own hands, covered in fine, pale dust. They were no longer the soft, hesitant hands of an accountant. They were the hands of a maker. They were growing.